microservices, endpoints, and single function apps, including how the security and authentication go with that. You may have a developer that wants to put something out, but maybe you should ask them what the security and authentication around that. Next is containers and limitations. Obviously, you don't want to set up a whole full-blown application within a microservice and the container. I think Winnie was originally trying to do that. That's why her image was so big. But I was trying to talk to her about, not putting, pretty much everything as far as the service. You can just grab a Tomcat and throw it at the surface, basically. It doesn't work that way. Understanding serverless technologies. Now, here's something that's key right here. We will not have any more patching once this is in play. There is no patching on the AWS container side. The only patching that really gets done is really by the individual development teams, in which if they were to have to upgrade their JVM or something underlying with that, they would have to go ahead and do their own patching and deploy it out themselves. But there's no more of the Friday nights or whatever, Saturday night type patching and restarts and testing. There's no more of that.
So quick question on that, Doug, because I know as part of FSA, one of the things that we're going to be able to take advantage is that every month they're going to give us a new AMI that should have the latest patches and security scans. So how's that going to work for them? Don't they have to do something similar to that, to make sure that it's fresh and current and tested? That's going to be their responsibility?
Well, here's the problem is that what does that actually mean as far as fresh? Keep in mind, this is the underlying, with Fargate and Lambda, right, it's considered serverless. Although in reality, we know nothing is serverless. We don't care about what runs underneath. All we really care about is the actual Docker image. So
that's what I meant. So in terms of the Docker side, not the serverless side, but the Docker side.
Part of what's not put in play right now is the scanning piece, and that is something that they're actually working on too, the cloud team.
Okay.
Meaning, before I do a build, with a Docker build to create the image, that part of that process will be to do that scan to see if it's like the latest. And if not, it'll fail it.
But with that scan, because like for us, they'll scan it before they give it to us, right? We'll put our stuff on top of it and then scan it again.
That has yet to be defined. It'll most likely be, my guess is that it'll most likely be scanned, and you can't complete the build unless you have whatever the latest in the
Oh, okay. Your stuff.
I guess they were talking about that too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not in play right now because they, in fact, I had to go look at some of the Veracode stuff that they want to kind of put in too for that scanning, but that's not put in play yet.
Okay.
So I talked about the serverless, and cloud repos, everything we're using GitHub. We're not using Bitbucket. So it'd be good to kind of have just a basic understanding of that as well as how it's kind of structured. And also the AWS account structure. So this is a basic understanding for both areas, operations and DSV, what we should kind of understand. Under the DSV side, we kind of have to be kind of integrators right now, meaning, a developer on a container platform may come up to you and say, hey, what's the best way I can accomplish, this particular app? What services do I use for it? Do I use a queuing service? Do I use some sort of email service? Do I need secrets? Those type of things. So part of a DSV skill set will be to know how to kind of integrate that and work directly with the developers on that stuff. Okay? And that goes along with kind of the integration patterns and some of the capabilities within the AWS platform. Understanding the CI/CD pipelines that we have in play using the code build as well as the code pipelines that are put in play. I am going to talk about, let me switch over to this. Now remember I showed you guys a couple weeks ago about the whole build process? Which one is it? This one. I showed you this diagram right here. Okay, and how that kind of works. It looks complicated, but it's not that complicated. I'll talk about that another probably session. Most of this is the developers will really have to know more about that than really us as specifics. But that goes along with this one, which I'm going to talk about actually in our Thursday meeting, or next Thursday if it's DSC. But it's really, what I did was I automated part of the pipeline process when you cut a release branch, which is called the Lambda function, which does a bunch of different things. So I'll talk a little bit about this, but having a basic understanding of how this kind of process works within AWS AWS will be helpful too, because there may be times where a developer may have a little bit of questions. Most of the stuff they should know, meaning because that's part of what they build up. But who knows if they'll have like some other types of questions with that.
Hey Doug, one thing also, when they are, I guess I know you're not talking about infrastructure, but in your bullet points here, I guess maybe that would be the last bullet point. You know, when the developer has finalized his infrastructure pipeline in test, that means he's got his pipeline working and he thinks he's got everything working. We need to go in there and look at it before it actually goes into dev staging production. Make sure that everything is he's not breaking any, he's not violating anything, or it's everything's secure. I guess that would be the last bullet point on DSC, correct?
No, this one is a little bit different. That one is more understanding how that pipelines work and kind of that flow, right? That's one thing, and then understanding what they have created. And that's really understanding the cloud offerings, right? Because if they create something, you have to know what the limitations are, right? Those type of things. If they decide to create an RDS database. Okay. Yeah, so that's not this one. This one right here is really understanding really the CG cloud account standards, and this is really from the cloud team, and understanding what limitations they have put in. A lot of their teams revolved around like IAM and how that's done, and how you could kind of switch users and that type of thing. But that's what this one is right here.
So understanding cloud team's solution to AZ stuff and all that.
Yeah.
Facts what they.
Yeah, because that's their kind of solution to AZ.
Right. Okay.
And obviously performance and cloud security. So, and another thing to keep in mind is that when a developer cannot put out a service without us knowing. I know that was one of the things, meaning there has to be two changes, right? The web proxy controller is one. They cannot migrate things out unless there's a pull request approval. And secondly is that obviously if it's a pattern that's non-existing, it has to be done on Akamai. And I'll show you that on Akamai in a bit. Okay, so let's just quickly go operations-wise. They should have basic understanding of the ECS cluster and task and what a container is. For the most part, a developer can do that restart and do kind of their deployments. So operations would have to kind of see things more overall, or if a developer can't do something or they don't quite know what's going on, if the service is even up or running because they can't log in, an operations person would have to kind of have general knowledge of kind of how that works. And also general knowledge of Splunk. Splunk, because that's where everything is logged. Keep in mind, developers have access to all the logs within there. Same access as us. If you go into Splunk, if you go into the standards, it will show you, which one am I in? Splunk. This is a Splunk configuration, I think. But there's an area I have, which, you can see that these are the indexes right here. So you can just go ahead and search it. But they put everything in the Splunk. So the operations guy would have to know kind of where the logs are.
Does that include Winnie's latest work that she did for the meeting recommendation services on the digital AWS?
That's actually in there if you go search for it. Yeah. I'll show you a little bit about the Splunk logs later when I talk about the web proxy controller, because that's the key that you're going to have to understand. When you troubleshoot a container, it's not straightforward. In fact, it's more difficult to troubleshoot a container than a Tomcat because of your lack of access. In fact, if a container has an issue, the only thing you can really see, you can't really go into AWS. I've told these developers this before too, but you can't go into AWS and say, whoa, what's wrong with it? There's not much you can see. It's dependent upon how you log it, right? And that is only available to them on Splunk. And in fact, occasionally I have some problems with my stuff. You actually, in fact, they will have to do this, and this is where the Docker skills come into play. What I had to do to troubleshoot some of the stuff, I actually had to go into the repo, clone the repo and I had to go ahead and start it up locally to kind of troubleshoot it. It's actually a little easier to troubleshoot it locally. You can't really troubleshoot it in the runtime environment. There's not much you can do.
That's a problem though for VDI folks, right?
What's the problem? Oh, they can't.
They can't.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not. I hate to say this, but that's not my issue. I actually spoke with the guy in charge of the VDI about that. Basically, what the problem is that you can't install Docker on a VDI.
Right. The VDI is already using that functionality.
Except for Mac. I think in Mac they can.
Yeah.
So I told it, like, I actually mentioned them, probably 5 months ago. Actually, I asked them that a couple of times. They said they were looking at it, but I don't think anything has been done so far with it.
I checked. They're not doing anything with it.
That seems like a lot to troubleshoot something, to have to download, have the VDI or Docker running, and then you have to download the image just to see what's wrong, right?
It's the same thing with OCP, I mean, it's just the nature of containers because, but I'll talk to you about some of the stuff I've kind of put into as far as what you can utilize to troubleshoot this. But it won't be really you troubleshooting it, Chris, unless they don't know what's going on.
Developer, right? Developer.
Yeah, the developer is the one who has to go download. I did it because it was some of my stuff. I couldn't troubleshoot it actually on the platform. There's nothing to see, really. I had to go download it and then figure it out myself.
Okay, that makes sense, because developers should already have an alpha running, so it shouldn't be...
Yeah, they all, right now, the way they run it is they do development locally, and then they also have... I'll talk about the development lifecycle, too, but they do everything locally. They should be able to start with Docker and do as much testing as they can. And when they do infrastructure testing, they do it on the test environment, test account. We have a test account.
Okay, I was just asking because it shouldn't be an expectation of ops to have to do that every time, right? Because
No. What this statement is, in fact, I don't even have it on here, is that from our standpoint, we should have a general understanding of Docker right here.
Okay. Okay.
It's for our own sake too. I mean, I used it. I did it that way. I mean, in fact, I have a lot of stuff up there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So on operations and network connectivity, you should understand some of that because that's part of the overall troubleshooting, and then also how Akamai integrates with that, which I'll talk about probably next. Any other questions in this area? Okay. So let me think about this. Services example. Okay, remember this doc right here? This diagram right here? Actually, let me do this one first.